Welcome to the Sibling Rivalry channel. My name is Aaron, and today I'm going to be talking to you about filament storage and keeping your filament dry and fresh.
A machine that can make copies of almost anything.
So welcome back from the intro. When it comes to storing filament, you definitely want to treat it as a different thing from any other part of your printer. Actually, when it comes down to it, you should treat all the different consumables for your printer differently. Like for example, if you have glue stick or like 3D lac or 3D goop for your build surface, you should be treating that differently from anything else. Like you would want to look at the manufacturer's details, make sure that you keep the container closed. You don't want to use a dried out product or something that evaporates and condenses. And that's the same thing with filament. When it comes to PLA and nylons especially, you want to make sure that you keep them at the correct moisture level. ABS is a little more tolerant, same as PTG and a few other filaments. But when it comes to PLA, which is a very common filament, almost everybody prints PLA these days, you do need to keep it relatively dry, and we're going to cover some details about that for you today. So if your filament goes bad, you can have a whole bunch of different problems, and it can be really hard to track down what those problems or what's causing those problems until you realize that it could be the filament. In my past experiences, I've had problems where my filament is too dry or too moist and it clogs or under extrudes in the over extrudes and under extrudes in the nozzle. And you can also have filament breakages, which if you're using a Bowden setup, it's not too bad. But if you're using a direct drive extruder where the spool is a distance away from the extruder itself without any connection, you could have all sorts of different problems when it breaks. You could end up with feeding problems, filament run out, depending on where your filament runout sensor is. If you have a filament runout sensor, the printer could be completely unaware that the filament has broken, and you could end up wasting a whole bunch of time and clogging your extruder. The list could go on for problems that you could have with bad filament. There are a few storage solutions that are out there. There's a few pre-made ones that you can get from various suppliers. We'll have some linked down below if you wanted to look into that option. There's nothing wrong with buying a pre-made option. Sometimes you just want something that just works and you don't want to have to deal with it. But if you're looking to save a few bucks, we're going to show you a few different ways. Well, we're going to show you one way to store your filament and a trick that you can kind of use with that, as well as we'll talk about some different options. There's you could always use a food dehydrator to dehydrate your filament. You could theoretically use a stove to dry the filament and kind of get any moisture out of it, but that does run the risk of accidentally melting your filament. I've actually had limited success with the stove option, or like the oven option I should say, drying filament in the oven. It's pretty hard from my experience to get it to work properly, getting the temperature set evenly. Here in Canada, most of our stoves or ovens or even our appliances are all based on imperial still for some reason, because a lot of our stuff comes in from the States. Getting the temperatures exactly right, and even getting, like, I'm living in a older apartment with the appliances provided. The oven isn't very reliable when it comes to temperature control, so it's a little risky to put put a full spool of filament in the oven, because you could essentially be sacrificing it to the oven god and just end up with a melted spool of filament. I've had issues when I was living in a shared apartment in college where I put a spool of filament in the oven and I had it cracked open to let it kind of dehumidify, so to speak, like kind of make an impromptu dehumidifier out of the oven. And someone messed with the temperature control and I ended up with a spool of filament that was only a spool of filament in the loosest of terms. It was essentially just kind of a puddle. And one problem you can have with that, oh, I think we just had a power outage. One problem that you can have with that is it can actually affect the diameter and the tolerances of the filament along the length of it, because you're heating it and warping it. Right now, I've been having quite a bit of success using dry bags. I did try using a Sterilite bin with a foam gasket on it to kind of keep the filament dry, but I found it was limiting in how I could store the filament and how many pieces of filament I could actually store in it. Like how many spools, I should say, not pieces of filament. Ideally, you have spools and not pieces of filament. But what I've been doing, actually, is what I'm going to show you here today. So, I went to a home store recently and picked up a tea ball or a herb ball. These are pretty common all over the world. You can use them for infusing things for soup or sauces. You can also use them for tea. You could use any, what I would suggest is any steel mesh tea ball or equivalent. And I'm just going to open this up here. Sorry for any crinkling on channel. There we go. Just mangle the bugger. The great thing about the steel mesh is even if you dent it, you can reshape it. Oh, and it's oven safe. When it comes to certain tea balls or infusers, like there's a lot of silicone ones that we've seen on the market lately, like the cutesy little ones that are shaped like cats or dogs or penguins. It's kind of a big trend, I guess, for tea. The problem is you don't know the grade of the silicone that they're made out of. It could melt and it could cause issues down the road. With these, you know it's metal, it should be stainless steel. What I normally do is I just remove this little clip, and it can be a little fussy getting this off, but it should just have a little spring clip on it. If yours doesn't, you can always just use a pair of scissors or a multi-tool to kind of remove that. Just use whatever tools you have on hand. You could even rip it off in theory as long as you don't damage the actual ball itself. We're just going to be using this part. The only other things we're going to be using today are a dry bag from Amazon that came with a vacuum pack, like a vacuum pump I should say, a pair of scissors which you can kind of get away without, and some desiccant packs that would have come in your filament. So normally when you buy filament, it will come in a vacuum packed bag. So this is usually sealed in factory, and there's a desiccant pack in there if you can see it. And if your filament is not sealed, you definitely want to do what I'm going to show you now. So, and if you're not aware, you can also get desiccant packs for free with pretty much anything. You go to like buy clothes and it's in your shoebox, it's in this, it's in that. Some of them actually come in little adhesive strips now. Typically they all should function the same, but check just to be 100% certain. Make sure it's not like a charcoal or something like that. You want something that's a silica packet or silica gel, ideally the one where they're the pellets. And what you're going to do is open your tea ball, and then you're going to open your packet here, and we can see that this is the little silica pellets. It's pretty small, but we're going to just pour these in, and you can just put in as many bits of silica as you'd like. So there is a reason why we don't just keep them in the paper packaging, and that is because, from my experience, when you try to dehydrate these or bake them in the oven to dehydrate them, the paper burns. It might even just essentially disintegrate in the oven and just leave you with a tray of hot silica balls. So the idea here is using the packet itself, or the tea ball I should say, as a way to contain the silica. Now ideally you don't want to go with something too fine of a grind. It actually turns out this one here I just opened is a pretty fine powder, as you might be able to see there. But it should still be fine as long as you're not going to shake it around and mess with it too much. You might get a bit of spillage, but just use a damp cloth to wipe it up. Ideally, you don't want to get this on your hands or anything, so if you have gloves, that's preferable, because a lot of times, because this is a hyper-absorbent material, if you get it on your skin, you get really itchy and dry skin. It's kind of similar feeling to like when you get fiberglass on your skin if you've ever worked with insulation. So what we're going to do now is take this Amazon Basics vacuum bag, which you can get this in any size that you're comfortable with. I just bought the biggest ones that were the cheapest. So it's the 28 by 20 inch or the 70 centimeter by 50 centimeter. It's the medium size. Yeah, the idea is that you can fit multiple spools in here. And just make sure that you have your filament kind of in a way that it's not going to tangle, so use the holes to hold the filament. You want to make sure you don't have a pointed tip on this, otherwise it might puncture the bag when you go to vacuum seal it. But we're just going to slide that in here and set the scissors off to the side. And what I like to do personally, once the thing is sealed, is actually just set the ball resting in the center of the spool, which kind of holds it in place in the packet. Now we can just go and seal up this guy, which I like to use the little zipper thing, which it's actually a removable clip that kind of works as a zipper. I like to do that and then go over it with my fingers just to make sure that everything's properly sealed. And then you just take the pump, and with this model, the pump just screws on. I believe you can use a vacuum hose with this, but yeah, you just slowly just suck the air out. And you're noticing you just don't want to have to pump as much out. Like if you've got tennis elbow or something like that, you can actually just take this pump off and squeeze the bag, and it'll actually just let the air out through the valve there. So you'll have varied success with that, but you can always just use the pump. And you might just have to peel away the plastic because it's going to want to seal up on itself. And you just go slow and seal this up. And you can see it's actually deforming the ball here, which is fine because this is fairly malleable, so you don't have to worry about that. You just kind of go until you feel like it's safe. You don't want to hurt yourself or damage the bag. Got that sealed, and then you just seal up that valve with the included screw top, which presses against the little rubber gasket, holds everything in place, and there you go. You've got your filament stored, and the great thing about doing it this way, you can put these anywhere you want. You don't have to worry about having specific space set aside for like one of the pre-made solutions. That's why I like to stick with this. I thought about buying some of the pre-made filament storage boxes that have the dehumidifier and hygrometer built into them, but this works perfectly for my uses. And if you find that your filament isn't dry enough, you just take out this T-ball and you throw it in the oven. And if the packet doesn't say specifically on here what temperature to dehydrate it at, because like this packet's actually meant to be reusable, but I don't really trust the paper or the cotton packaging. Like here it says 245 Fahrenheit at 16 hours. You can usually increase the temperature and run it for a shorter period of time because this is metal, and as long as you let the metal cool down and don't touch it with your bare hands, practice basic kitchen safety, you should be fine. I typically run them at about 400 Fahrenheit for an hour and a half. Yeah, it works great for me. Just kind of monitor it, make sure that you're not going to have any weird problems with your stove or your oven, I should say. And yeah, you should have a solid solution for this. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, if this is an option for you, if you do something similar yourself. Hopefully this helps out a few people. I know before I started doing it this way, I was kind of getting intermittent results with filament dryness and kind of keeping things pristine and working. If you liked the video, please give us a thumbs up. We really appreciate it. If you aren't subscribed, think about subscribing. We're actually going to be doing a daily upload for the next, I believe, 2 weeks to kind of coincide with, I know a lot of people are off work or off school due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I believe it's upscaled to a pandemic now. Yeah, if you're looking for something to kind of pass the time, we're gonna have content for you guys every day for the next 2 weeks, along with our regular content on Mondays and Thursdays. So stay tuned. We're gonna have some videos for you doing all sorts of different things, not just 3D printing. If you have any suggestions for stuff to do, let us know in the comments down below. If you have any comments on this, leave them down below. And yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day, and bye for now.